morning, afternoon, everyone. For the ones online, it's a great pleasure to welcome you all to this workshop called Overregulation, Balancing Policy and Innovation in Technology, under the subtheme of the Harnessing Innovation and Balancing Risk in the Digital Space. My name is Nicolas Fiumarelli, and I will be moderating the session. I represent the Latin American and Caribbean group from the technical community, and it's a privilege to be among such a distinguished group of panelists and participants. I am very glad that we have this quantity of people in the room. I think the session title is very interesting for you. You know, we are in an era when we need to decide if regulate or not regulate, so this is a hot topic nowadays. You know, technology and innovation have always been drivers of societal progress. However, the fast-paced evolution of the digital technologies, especially artificial intelligence, presents unique challenges. So how can we foster innovation without stifling it through over-regulation? How do we ensure safety and the ethical standards while allowing technology to reach its full potential? These are some of the critical questions we are going to address today, but these require collective deliberation. So you are all invited to give your ideas, and today we aim to address them. So the session will be conducted, as you know, in this roundtable format to encourage equal participation and also interaction among our esteemed panelists and the audience. To set the stage, I just will briefly introduce our panelists. Following this, each of the panelists will take a moment to introduce themselves and share a first motivation for participating in this session. Afterwards, we will dive into the core discussion, addressing some of the key policy questions. Toward the end, we will open the floor for questions from the audience, both online and on-site here, moderated by our colleague Ose. So let's meet our panelists. First, Natalie Terkova. She is the chair of the IGF in Czech Republic, also a LAC member at the ICANN, and vice facilitator on the board of the ISOC Youth Standing Group. You know, the ISOC Youth Standing Group, together with the Youth Coalition on the Internet Governance, every year organize youth-led sessions to bring the young voices to the Internet Governance Forum. She is also a PhD candidate, focusing on the digital skills of children and adolescents, their online opportunities and risks, with the emphasis on online safety, online privacy, and AI. And she has recently contributed to a report on AI usage in medical spheres, exploring the challenges of deploying AI technologies in healthcare. Additionally, her works includes critical research on the role of AI in addressing child sexual abuse material called CSAM. So, Natalie, could you please introduce yourself further and share your motivation for joining this session?
Thank you so much, Nicholas. Can anyone hear me well? Perfect. So, as you said, thank you for summing it up so perfectly. I am representing the academia stakeholder group. I am a researcher as my day job. And I was recently very much focused on the AI and how it can impact the critical topics I'm focusing on in my research, which on one side is the health system and, for instance, also finding health information online, how people trust health-oriented information provided by, for instance, AI-driven chatbots and so forth. And on the other side, I'm also invested in the topic of CSAM, as you mentioned, so harmful content focusing on children and also abuse of such materials depicting children in intimate scenarios where AI is perceived more as a double-edged sword. So I hope to tell more about this during the session, as I feel this is a crucial topic. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Natalie. This is, as I say at the beginning, a hot topic, right? We are here to decide whether it's good to regulate or not regulate. There are several factors that could bring us to think about regulation, but on the other hand, you know, this could undermine human rights, like the access to information and different ones. So there are several ways to regulate, so we are looking forward to deep dive on these kind of things for maybe to have good outcomes and some key takeaways on how policymakers actually could have solutions for this kind of issues. Now I will introduce Paola Galvez. She is Peruvian and is a tech policy consultant dedicated to advancing ethical AI and human-centric digital regulation globally. She holds a Master of Public Policy from the University of Oxford and serves as the founding director of IDON AI Lab, UNESCO's lead AI national expert in Peru, and a team leader at the Center for AI and the Digital Policy. Paola brings her unique perspective from her work at the OECD and UNESCO on international AI governance. You all must be hearing about UNESCO these days because every country in the world actually have national AI strategies, and UNESCO has, the RAM, that is the readiness assessment. And drawing on her experience with the UNESCO AI RAM in Peru, she will provide some insights into this balancing regulatory safeguards and fostering innovation on the global scale. So Paola, could you introduce yourself and tell us about your motivation for this workshop?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much, Nicolas. Thank you all for joining this session. I think it's really critical discussion to be having. But I will put the different opinion here. I don't think the question is anymore whether to regulate or not to regulate. We're past beyond that. It's my opinion. And what we're working now is on how to regulate. Right? Let me go one step back because you asked me to introduce myself a bit, and you did so well. Thanks so much, Nicolas. Just to give a bit of an overview, my perspective here comes with a background starting with the private sector. I used to work at Microsoft for almost 5 years, and it was me saying, innovation must come. Please does not prevent innovation in my country, which is a developing one. So advocating for auto-regulation, but that's back 2013, when artificial intelligence was just starting in my country. I mean, in other countries it was way developed, but the topic at the moment was cloud computing. So just to mention, that was my first version. Then I worked at the government. I advised the Secretary of Data Transformation of Peru, and that was an absolute meaningful role because I contributed to the AI National Strategy, and I led the Digital Skills National Strategy. So that changed a bit, and I understood how it's to work in the government, what are the challenges inside. I'm not saying good or justify anything, but it happens. Then I paused my career and went to Oxford to study, and that's what brought me to international organizations. And at the moment, I'm an independent consultant working for UNESCO and the OECD, contributing to my country because I just finished the UNESCO AI Readiness Assessment Methodology. I can tell more about it later. And also I founded Idonia Lab, which is Spanish, that which is Idonia. Idonia Lab, trying to make AI benefit everyone through evidence-based digital regulation and capacity building, directed to women. Now going to the topic and what motivated me when Nicolas came with the idea of having this discussion, it was all in from the moment zero, because I thought, yes, now that I'm in the global perspective, I live in Paris at the moment, and this question is not only happening in developing countries, even I speak with a lot of startups in Paris. Now they don't know how to implement the EU AI Act, so it's been crazy and there's a lot of doubts. So I'd like to start and just leave it here, but by giving 3 key questions to start this conversation. I think first we need to think, what is the public policy problem? What we want to regulate comes from that very first question. Regulation is needed to address public policy problems, fundamental and collective rights. So let's find the more adequate solution by finding the problem. That's first step. Second, when to regulate. Map available regulatory instruments, because most of us have consumer codes or consumer law. Not every country has data protection law, but that's a good start, right? Intellectual property laws are in place, so let's see what we have and assess the feasibility of adopting this. Because bringing to Congress, here we have a member, somebody working at the Parliament of Argentina in the table, for instance, it takes a lot of time. So if we can start enforcing the laws that we already have in place, that's a good start. And the third question is how to regulate. Identifying a combination of AI regulatory approaches. I'm happy to tell you more about this, Nicolas. There's several approaches to regulate AI at the moment. And there is no one single best one, but we can need to find according to our context. Thank you.
Thank you, Paola. Just summarizing that. So the first approach is what is the public policy problem, then is about when to regulate, and at the end is how to regulate. Okay. So now I will introduce Ananda here at my left. He was stuck in the Uber in the traffic, but he made it. Thank you, Ananda, to be with us. Ananda represents the Youth Coalition on the Internet Governance and is a global AI governance expert. He has extensive insights into the global regulatory impacts on technological innovation. So Ananda, please share more about your works and what you bring today on our discussion.
Thank you, Nicolas, and all the panelists. I'm so honored to be here with you guys, with some hiccups, so of course. Anyway, so I mostly work with young people. I think capacity building of young people, helping people start their youth initiatives in their countries, and how we bring young people to the global internet governance, and not only global, how do we engage in their capacity building in regional and national levels. So that is my major focus right now. So I am also working on different AI policies. Paula and myself did join the KDEP together. I think Sabha is also here. Sabha was also part of our cohort. And then uh, we have been learning about how developing AI landscape is affecting. And my perspective is very more concerned in the developing nations, because I come from the global south, and from the global south as well, Nepal itself is a very difficult terrain, and we have many challenges. We have outdated legislations, and some recent legislation like EUA Act, which have extra territorial jurisdiction. It is not only applied in EU region. So-called Brussels effect is affecting the legislation worldwide. So countries like Nepal are also trying to build their own AI policies, but as I have been focusing on is how do we build the capacity of those developing nations so that they can build a comprehensive AI policy that will actually leverage the power of AI in developing those nations. And of course, how do we build our capacity of young people in engaging in AI governance processes. Another thing is, while we talk about digital divide, we have been seeing now AI divide, like the people having access to AI and then people not having access to AI. So my focus would be on how do we build capacity of other stakeholders so that we can eliminate this divide. So I think I'll go on other things on second round. Thank you, Nicholas.
Thank you, Ananda. And just summarizing that it's a great issue to address on the developing nations, right? Because there are difficult areas, as you mentioned. Not every country is prepared or has different challenges while updating the legislation, because every legislation is different in every country. And in the light of the AI Act, that is a mandatory thing, and about these territorial jurisdictions, right? Because the internet by nature is without frontiers, so it's very difficult sometimes to regulate these kind of things. In my opinion, as a technical from the core of the internet, because IP addresses are not like country means, so sometimes it's not easy to see how a legislation from a country can affect the way we regulate on the internet, because, as I said at the beginning, the internet is, for nature, transfrontier. And as the excellencies from Saudi Arabia say at the opening ceremony, and Ananda mentioned, we are on the AI divide now. So this is a new concept that we need to take off and see how to leverage the power of AI, as you say, Ananda, and how to, about the young people that is using AI a lot, right? So now I am going to introduce James, that is our speaker online. If the technicals can put James at the screen, will be great. James comes from the private sector in Africa, where he focuses on innovation and the impact on regulatory practices. James is going to share examples of how African innovations navigate regulatory challenges and thrive in the face of adversity, right? So James, you are with us there. Please introduce yourself for the people here on site. You know, we have a full room. So share what drives your interest in this discussion, please.
So thank you very much, Nicholas, for that introduction. My name is James Amate. I am from Ghana, and I basically come from a background of product management, software development, where we've had to create both consumer and enterprise products for in education, in insurance, and also in banking. And I've realized in that space that innovation does not happen in a vacuum. There are certain regulatory frameworks that need to happen for innovation to come to the forefront. Now, my friend Adan was stuck in traffic. He was complaining about Uber, and Uber is one of those innovations that came about through, should I say, technology, the advancement of technology. And one of those advancements is something we call GPS tracing or GPS tracking. Without that GPS tracking and without that being embedded in phones, we would not have something we called Uber. And without internet, a platform like Uber will not be able to locate our friend and get into the site. And these are some of the things that we tend to lose sight of sometimes, because when we try and build software and we are trying to do digital transformation, we think, oh, it's all about doing customer research and doing market research. But in all, there are certain societal and regulatory things that need to trigger innovation to happen. So, for example, I just gave an example of I just give an example for Uber. Now there are certain examples around regulation. So when we look at the internet, for example, how it came about was the decoupling of AT&T, and that led to the widespread, should I say, infrastructure development that brought forth the internet, right? So without that, we would not have things like broadband. It's not directly correlated, but the breaking down, the regulation that led to the breaking down of AT&T, especially in the United States, is what, sort of brought forth advancements in the development of the internet as we know it today. Now, there are certain times when policy tries to get in the way of innovation, and I would use one of our local laws as an example. We call it the e-levy. It's a very notorious regulation that came to bring a tax on, should I say, financial transactions done online. Right. Now, the problem with that was that Ghana was at the beginning of digital financial literacy. So a lot of people were now beginning to transact online. So the law in of itself was not bad, but I think the timing and then the implementation of it did not have a lot of, should I say, public approval. And, according to reports, there were times when the government of Ghana, missed revenue targets, from taxation, and also the utilization of mobile money also reduced because of the tariffs. So sometimes, regulation, may have a good idea, good intention, but sometimes it's the implementation of the regulation that makes it difficult for innovation to come forth. So I think as much as regulation is important, we also have to look at the timing of the regulation, and especially in Africa where we are mostly now catching up to a lot of innovation. We do not have a lot of homegrown built solutions, so most of the solutions we use are imported. So we have to take our time with regulation and to make sure that there is enough understanding and there's enough appreciation and there's enough, should I say, uses or use cases for the technology before we try to regulate it. Now, I do understand that, sometimes the timing of regulation is important. So and as much as we do not want early regulations, we also do not want late regulations where it's very difficult for where the technology runs ahead of the society and it's very difficult for us to control it. So thank you very much for the floor. Over to you, Nicholas.
Thank you so much, James. So you also touched on this idea of regulatory frameworks. So sometimes happen for innovation, right? But population need to be prepared. Innovation is not bad, as you say, but we need public approval. There are different cultures, there are different social at the countries, and while you mentioned that digital money reduce tariffs, on the other hand, that could be a difficult for someone that doesn't know how to use the technology to use that money on the online, right? So the implementation of the regulations sometimes is a challenge, and well, or the people to understand or have this digital financial literacy, as you say this concept. So finally, we have Osei Manukagia here at the table. He is our online moderator and is taking all the questions from the chat, and he will also address questions or direct the people here on site to take the mic. So Osei will ensure this active participation for our virtual audience and on site. So Osei, please introduce yourself and tell us about your role in the internet governance and in supporting this session.
Hello, thank you very much. This topic is such an important subject matter, balancing policy and innovation. I'll be your online moderator and also help moderating on site. So if you have any question, you just raise your hand, or if you are joining us online, you just have your question in the chat box. As a public interest technologist, this topic is very, very interesting to me. I love how you put it. How do we go about the regulation? The issue about regulation, I think we've moved past it. Is it a silver bullet? And if we are going about it, how do we approach it? The nuances we hope to delve. So we are very excited to join this conversation. Break all your inputs, and we help dive deeper. Thank you very much. Over to you, Nicholas.
Thank you so much, Jose. So we will now begin the core discussion here of today's workshop. So focusing on critical policy question. Each speaker will have approximately 3 to 5 minutes to respond the questions directed at them. So policy question number 1. What specific regulations currently hinder the adoption of AI, and how can this be reformed to promote technological advancement to ensure safety? Natalie, specifically for you, about your recent work on child sexual abuse material, focuses also on AI's role in the creation of this material, right? So can you explain what CSAM is? Where do you see the need for regulation there?
Thank you so much, Nicholas. Some of you may be joining also my lightning talk, which I delivered on the day 1, if I'm not wrong. So I hope I will not repeat myself here. And I feel like extending the discussions on CSAM and how it affects the youth, the survivors, and also overall the society and the well-being of those involved is now at its next step when we talk about AI and how does this come into the place, and it's deepening the crucial aspects of this issue that we are focusing on. So first, let me just start by saying that what it is. Usually we talk about child pornography or these types of terms are more known to us. So right now we are focusing more on this shortcut CSAM, which stands for child sexual abuse material, because it is more broad and it allows us also to involve in it something that can be manipulated through, for instance, technologies using AI models and so forth. Because recently, for instance, in Czech Republic, where I come from, we saw a big prevalence of images that were partially from already existing materials that were not harmful, were spread online, sometimes from the child themselves, sometimes from a caregiver, from a teacher who captured moments somewhere at the school property. However, then the AI stepped in, or someone using the tool, to make the person naked, for instance. And suddenly, such already existing material was then abused and transformed into CSAM. So that is why we're now also focusing on AI in relation to CSAM. So with this, I just want to highlight that now, introducing the AI, we have lots of discussions on how this can be potential for harm, unfortunately. However, also some people perceive it as a potential to use AI for detection. And there is this clash between, can AI tools and new emerging technologies be something that can help us tackle this issue, or if it's going to make everything way worse? And this is what I want to bring to this debate. Just to give you an idea about how prevalent the CSAM is, I have just a few stats. In 2023, in over 250,000 websites, there were hosted CSAM materials, and they were detected and taken down. However, we also have to be mindful that this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many things that we just don't know about. It can be in some closed forums, somewhere in the deep web, and so forth. So this is just the tip of the iceberg, and it is already so alarming. If we look at the specific types of materials, such as pictures, videos, these are around 85 millions that has been reported globally in the year 2021. So this is a very, very alarming number. We have to talk about deepfake technologies and how we can use some, let's say, advanced editing tools to make it easier for those perpetrators to make it manipulated, to make images and videos suddenly used for CSAM. And this is not just for those who see some form of excitement in these types of materials, but also there's a big money involved, because they know that there are people who are willing to buy such materials from these people. So we are now trying to find a balance between how we can still ensure that people are using the new technologies, which actually do have a big potential for helping us tackling all sorts of harmful content, not just CSAM, but also protecting our privacy and protecting the privacy of those most vulnerable ones, in this case, children. Another thing is that right now we are talking a lot about these potential softwares that can detect when CSAM is around. However, this can go also back to grooming, which is the act when the perpetrator is slowly manipulating the child, and this is happening through text usually. But that would mean that some form of software would read the text we are typing somewhere, and that is a big clash between privacy and safety. So here I am also excited to hear your opinions on this issue, where we can find a sweet spot, where we can find a good balance between the right to use these technologies in our advance, use all the opportunities that AI and other emerging technologies can bring us, but also to minimize the risks that are involved with it. Thank you, Nico.
Thank you, Natalie. You touched on some interesting things because, as you mentioned, money is involved here. There are people that want to buy this kind of content, harness content, and also how to ensure this balance, right? Because there are people that is in technology for the good, right? The AI brings a lot of innovation, also for creativity, also for, wow, if you see the advancements nowadays, you see that it's very useful for a lot of words. There are a lot about, if you see the discussions on the policy network on artificial intelligence, on the job replacements, right? It's something that is happening worldwide, and the digital divide is increasing because of this, and it's called the AI divide, as Ananda said. So, but how to protect the privacy as well, because there are solutions, as you mentioned, that grouping or software to detect, but it's more on the surveillance part, right? It's like how to avoid these kind of practices, or in my opinion as well, is like some countries have this approach, like of maybe they can install software in all mobile phones, or having an agreement with the mobile companies that are two or three, not so much, the publishers. So maybe it's easy for them to do this technology, but on the other side is an attack to the privacy, to the human rights, and so it's difficult to balance on these critical issues such as violence, child pornography, and etc. And it's not a new thing, right? Because this has years of talking about these issues, and there are like different views and opposite directions. So thank you for touching on this issue to introduce. So let's go to another area, that is the policy question number 2. How can policymakers, that we have so policymakers here, how these policymakers and regulatory bodies design more flexible regulations, or that can adapt to rapid technological advancement, as we were saying, but without compromising on some of the ethical standards and public safety. And here we are also touching on the ethical, right? So we can mention about bias, we can mention about copyright, I don't know, different issues that are not on the same page as privacy, but related to these emerging technologies. So Paola, now it's your turn. What are in your opinion, the prevalent regulatory approaches to AI governance you have seen? And is there a particular model around all these models that are on the UNESCO framework and other maybe documents out there that stands out as the most conducive to encouraging these innovations?
Thank you, Nicolas. Indeed, there are different approaches, but let's just to be all unified in one idea. I will mention some approaches, but there are no exclusive, right? They can be a mix of it when the policymakers are deciding. And I would like to explain on 5 of them. This is not an exhaustive list, it could be more, but we've seen risk-based, human rights-based, principles-based, rules-based, and outcomes-based. These, what I'm about to explain to you, you can read more about in a report that is called AI Generative Governance from the WEF. It was published this year. So the risk-based approach is the most common one. We've seen it, and actually the European Europe adopted it. It really optimizes in terms of regulatory resources because it focuses their efforts on the areas with higher risks and minimize burdens on low-risk areas. Advantages it has, it allows regulatory frameworks to be flexible and adaptable when our circumstances are changing. But the challenges is like risk assessment are complex. At the moment, we see that the AI office is developing the guidelines. There is no one model on the risk assessment that should be done. So I've seen now in the market developing different ones. But how do we know, how can we be sure that this risk assessment is the correct one, right? Is there one? We're still in that process. Second is the human rights-based approach, which should be, in my opinion, the best one. Why? Because with this technology, we're seeing, and Natalie mentioned it, you also, Nicolas, technology, these AI, artificial intelligence technologies are reproducing society's bias, deepening inequalities, plus different other challenges. However, we cannot afford not being tech optimists. AI is the reality, is with us, and it holds tremendous promise. I do believe that when it is used wisely, it can really hold potential to hit SDGs and to help us be more efficient, and for no reason we won't be replaced, at least from what I've seen now. But human rights are at stake. And this human rights-based approach means being grounded on international human rights law, which we already have. The advantage is the scope is not limited. In fact, AI system and the whole cycle of AI system must be under this regulation, should be developed and deployed in a way that respect and uphold human rights. There's no doubt. What are the challenges of this approach? There is some complexity and opacity on AI systems. We all know that these systems are called black boxes, and it also comes with the complexity that human rights protection are sometimes broadly worded, are hard to interpret sometimes, so we need lawyers specializing in international human rights law, and that's what is lacking, in my opinion, in the discussion of these AI laws, because we're not really having these people on the table, and there is no example on this. At the moment of hard law, the Council of Europe AI Convention on AI, Human Rights and the Rule of Law is the one that is putting human rights at the center, but that's not mandatory, and well, we've seen that the adherence process is on the way, so let's see how it goes. It sets basic principles and global standards on what we want in terms of AI, but it's not the hard law that is applying in our countries. The principle base is the one that is adopting most of the countries. The US with the Executive Order on Safe, Secure, and Trustworthy AI. Singapore. What is it? It sets out just fundamental principles, right? Fairness, accountability, and it is intended to foster innovation. So to your question, the principle-based approach could be the one that prevents the stifle of innovation, but protecting human rights in a sense with these principles. Fairness, right? No harm, but it's not complete. Then rules-based is the Chinese approach with the China interim measures for the management of generative AI as an example. It is very rigid, high compliance costs, but it lays out the detailed rules, so it really doesn't leave much space for interpretation. That's what is applying in China at the moment. And the outcomes base is what the Japanese government is applying, because it focuses on achieving measurable AI-related outcomes. It also intends to foster innovation and compliance, but it has limited control over the process, because how can you really measure the outcomes? It can be very vague, right? I would just like to finish by saying that there is a risk to having a Brussels effect in terms of our Latin America countries trying to do what the European Union has done. And it is very important to say that our countries are not Europe. We don't have the same context, so doing a copy-paste is not the solution. We can take best practices if they are already in place, but it's very hard to see really the result of the implementation of the EU AI Act, because it is still very new, and as you know, it is in a phase process to be enforced, so we cannot tell at the moment. And also, I would say, if you guys can have a takeaway from what I'm explaining to you of these 5 approaches, let's remember that any regulation that we want to approve in our countries, it must be under a public participation process, and meaningful one, meaning that sitting all the parties in the table and discussing what are their needs and how do they think they can be a solution. The readiness assessment methodology that I can tell you more later has this public consultation process and brings to the table the opinion of the public and the citizens. Thank you, Nicolas.
Thank you, Paola, for some detailed analysis on the 5 different approaches. I took some notes there, so we will have a good takeaways on that, and also on some noticeable comments you made on each of those. So on the same line, I will ask now Ananda, what are global examples of flexible AI governance that can inspire policymakers nowadays?
So I'd reflect on something, because our title is Overregulation and Balancing the Innovation. So let's go back to 1970s. If internet was regulated at the beginning, in the first 3 decades before the VCs started, we couldn't have this internet, like today we are using. We couldn't have been talking or discussing about internet governance anymore. So regulation is not always the best way of what do we call governance. And one of the Nicholas asked me what is the best example. Maybe UNESCO's AI ethics framework is one of the greatest example, which has been endorsed by I think more than 90 countries, 100 now I think countries. And then like OECD has been working on second version of their ethical AI concept. So these are like how principles can bind people rather than legislation. So I would, if you ask me, is it legislation or policy? I would go for policy-based approach, which would actually harness the power of AI rather than like regulating it and uh, like we call it over-regulation. So policy would be something that could actually promote the businesses without undermining the human rights. Like Paula mentioned, the human rights based approach is the must. And also I reflect on what Natalie said, like uh, while AI is being developed, there will be both sides, like pros and cons. Like if we take an example of cybersecurity, scammers are using AI to actually manipulate the people, and then like phishing attacks have been into another level with the use of AI. Well, at the same time, cybersecurity tools are being developed which use AI technologies to detect the patterns of the cybersecurity faster, and then like to at sometimes automated countermeasures are applied. Right now there are many tools developed by Palo Alto and other leading cybersecurity companies that employ AI to detect those technologies. So these are some kind of things. I think it is in the very premature development stage. We have just seen the power of generative AI when like ChatGPT exploded, and there are so many GPTs available, and we have only seen the power of generative AI. One thing is like while people are using AI, we should be very clear in terms of legislation or policy that how it will be used by public. Like today, school children are using AI or like ChatGPT or something generative AI to add on their knowledge. Will it give the right knowledge or not? That is very crucial. So these kind of considerations are very important, which needs to be considered, and it is also covered by different uh, frameworks that are being developed. But in a according to the national context, also we need to have how people will leverage that thing. Like if something is generated by AI, how do people distinguish those things? Maybe we can call it AI literacy. People need to know what they are using, what are the consequences, are the things they need to be um, good enough to distinguish between what is being generated by AI, what is original. And I think that are the baselines, that we need to focus on. I'll stop it here.
I like your idea, Sananda, but I think that recognizing if something is AI generated nowadays is more complex than everything that you can take of. So also on the complexity of these approaches, like because we want to balance flexibility, enforceability, practicality. So it's like risk-based methods demands nuanced assessments. Human rights-based approaches face challenges with opacity and legal gaps. Principles-based frameworks often lack enforceable mechanisms, so we have problems with each of the approaches. Also, the outcome-based model emphasizes model measurement, but may struggle, as Paola said, with contextual adaptation, and particularly in diverse regions, as you say, in Nepal, for example. So together, these approaches highlight I think, a more multidisciplinary collaboration and tailored strategies, right, to address AI multifaceted risk and opportunities effectively. Um, so going now for the online, James, we would like to see your face. From your experience, how has regulatory flexibility impacted on the African innovations, in your opinion? James, you're muted.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so thank you very much. I think your question is very interesting because we'll take COVID as an example. COVID, really, I'll say COVID catalyzed, or should I say highlighted the need for innovation over regulation. So during COVID, there was little regulation, it was all innovation. And together with that innovation, we're able to control the cost, the spread, and you know, the should I say, the lifestyle change that came with COVID, right? So what we want to do is that we do not want the case where it is just emergencies that allow us to be flexible with laws, but we want to adopt a lifestyle of having that flexibility, but keeping guard or being on watch, right? So it's like having a security man. You do not hope that a thief attacks you, but he's there for when the thief comes, right? So it's just like that. So I like the idea of policies over regulations. So frameworks, um, constructive ways of doing things that could, guide people on how to do it properly versus inhibiting what they can and what they cannot do. Of course, there are certain times when you can do that, but as we are currently in the experimental phase of innovation, especially with AI, is very tantamount that we allow it to spread its wings for us to know what is possible and what is not. In the African context, COVID really allowed. So, for example, we had the use of autonomous drones that were delivering COVID shots. They were delivering POPs. They were delivering face masks to remote um, organizations. We had trackers that were used to identify hotspots of COVID and be able to, design responses for them. And these are several other ways. We've also had issues of flooding in Ghana, where most of the work I do, especially in open data, has helped us to use AI to identify roads to be able to help relief get to victims of dam spillage in 2023. And we've done a lot of work around public health and collation of health data using mobile apps. And all of these things have been possible, through innovation. So I think innovation and regulation should be teammates rather than, you know, trying to be uh, competitors of who is right and who's superior. I think we should work and collaborate more. And innovation should not be an afterthought, and regulation should not be an afterthought, but rather we could build, these frameworks into our innovation pipelines and into our regulatory pipelines. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, James. Uh, Due to the time constraints, we are reaching to the end of our session. I will do a condensed question for all the panelists, so you have 1 minute each for answering. How can we how can successful examples of AI applications, right, and international frameworks we were talking, could inform regulatory strategy that balance strategic innovation, safeguarding employment, for example, as an issue, addressing societal impacts such as job displacements, and critical needs like the healthcare, industrial automation. So may we start with Paola? Uh, Drawing from your experience leading the UNESCO AI RAM? Yes.
Just, so the question was very long. So I'll do a wrap up. Just answering. First, think about local needs. what are the regulations that we have in place and how can we complement them. Sometimes, and I think this is a very personal opinion, we need an umbrella regulation, like an AI Act, an AI not guidelines, but it must be mandatory. Why is it? Because the country need to have a position. What the country wants the AI to do and to be for their citizens. What's the position of the country in terms of legal autonomous weapons? I think that should be yes or no, right? So that could be mandatory, and that's a prohibition or not. Surveillance, right? Are we using AI to safety and security, but let's be mindful of that it can target people from migration or other communities that are vulnerable or minorities. So it's very important when we're using that. And that is taking a position. That means regulation. That's law. In some other position, please, let's invest on capacity development. Digital skills is key in terms of using AI, because we will never be able as a country to leverage all the potential of this technology if we don't help our citizens understand it or use it as it best. Thank you. This is very condensed, but happy to speak later.
Thank you so much, Paola. Maybe Natalie, if you want to make 1 minute contribution on the healthcare part that you are the expert, please.
Of course, I'll try to be very brief. So I very much agree that it very depends on the specific case. We sometimes had discussions about, okay, what we should do in healthcare, but this is such a broad concept. And let's say that ethical considerations such as patients' privacy or the data protection of patients and minimizing the bias in algorithms when it comes to treatment and healthcare are really, from my perspective, non-negotiables. And definitely we have to take these into account when we talk about healthcare. However, when we talk about, let's say, diagnostic tools that can assist the doctors with some critical conditions, well, these carries way higher risks and higher risk stakes than, for instance, AI tools or other technologies used for administrative scheduling system. For instance, how we set a timeline for certain operations and stuff. So again, it is so broad, and we have to take into consideration the level of risks that is involved in this thing. So in light of this, I believe that those high-risk applications should undergo maybe more rigorous review before they come into praxis, while those low-risk innovations can proceed under lighter regulatory requirements, and then we can really grow and focus more on the innovation and make these things faster and more effective. So again, it's about balance, and I don't want to dive into more details, but I'm of course happy to talk about it more, because we recently conducted a robust research in Central Europe about the AI usage in the healthcare. We were also asking people whether they use it for their own questions. For instance, if they ask ChatGPT about, oh, I have this issue, this is bothering me, and if they trust what the AI is telling them, because one thing is the usage, and people can be just experimenting with the thing and just overall excited about these opportunities, but they are mindful that sometimes what it is recommended to them is not the best. So we have some very I would say interesting insights, and I'm happy to talk more about this also over coffee. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. So everyone go. No. Thank you so much, Natalie. So yes, we have only 1 hour session, so you can reach Natalie at the coffee and continue that conversation. Going for Ose, do we have any question online? And maybe we have one question for the on-site. The first that raised the hand can make it, okay?
Okay. So
Yes,
this is
Ose.
not really a question. This is a suggestion from someone. He talked about human rights being at the core of the conversation, as said by the UN. But I will have a question for all of us to mull over. I think the initiation or the conception of these policy questions, it starts from how the lack of trust between multi-stakeholder, the various multi-stakeholders. And a good example is argument A. This is an argument A. I want us to debate over this. The UK Secretary of State for Science and Technology, Peter Kyle, argues that tech companies, or say companies, should be treated like states because their investment in innovation exceed that of government. Argument B was some few weeks back where a former Dutch member of European Parliament argued that focus should be to strengthen the primacy of democratic governance and oversight and not to show humility. She argued further to highlight the need for self-confidence on the part of democratic government to make sure that these companies, these services are taking their proper role within a rule of law based system and are not overtaking it. Obviously, I think argument B sounds persuasive, but then how the unequal power of stakeholders, how do we ensure stakeholders do have a say in there? So at the conception or the initiation of all these conversations, policy conversation, is the lack of trust I have noticed. But if you have any question on site, please do raise your hand. Please be snappy because we have brevity, exercise brevity.
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Agustina, I'm from Argentina, and I have a quick question. So I see the, sorry. So when regulating AI or technology, what I found was like we have like different layers or aspects. So for instance, we have the users, we have the developers, we have regarding AI, the training of this AI. So in this sense, I see that users are already, if you want to say like in the physical world, punished by the law. But on the other side, like, do you think that, for instance, companies should be responsible for what they develop, or those who train the models should also be responsible for the effects that this has, or not?
Maybe if some of the panelists want to answer the question, and we go to the last question here, right? You want? Okay. Okay. Who wants to answer the question, or we go directly to the next question?
Thank you, moderator. Mine is on the topic of this discussion. Have we really reached the stage of overregulation, given that with the advent of ICTs and now with the coming in of emerging technologies, we have seen regulation playing catch up? It's usually technology ahead of regulation. So have we reached the stage of overregulation yet?
Do you have a question as well?
Well,
That will be the last panelist. Yes?
I think I can answer. I think I can answer this a bit.
Okay, James, you can answer and then wrap up.
Yes. So yes, there is a risk of innovation, going ahead of regulation, but it all boils down to AI literacy, and we totally come into an understanding of what AI really is and what AI is not, right? Because, for example, if you ask a lot of people what is AI, most of them will answer ChatGPT. But ChatGPT is just one use case of AI. It's not AI in it of itself, right? So we need to be able to build literacy programs for regulators, for developers, for users, for us to be able to have an understanding of what our intersecting interests are. And then we can be able to then look at those intersecting interests and then be able to now tailor AI solutions to our personal use cases. So most of my work for next year would literally fall around AI literacy and building literacy programs to help understand, help, should I say, proliferate the knowledge of what AI truly is and what AI is not, what it can do, what it should do, what it should be allowed to do, and then we can take the rest from there. Thank you very much. Happy to connect online.
Yes.
Yes, my name is James. You can find me on LinkedIn.
Okay, thank you for your time, James, and your valuable contribution. And thank you, everyone, for the engaging discussion. Sorry for the ones that were in the queue. We are 6 minutes out of time. Today, we explore these critical aspects of AI regulation and innovation, drawing some insight from diverse regions and sectors, as you have seen. So a special thanks to our panelists here and the valuable contribution, and also our audience for your active participation. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the IGF.
Thank you, our online audience.
We might take a photo on the front if you want. Come, everybody.